What is up, my friends, and welcome to a very special video, one of my most frequently requested ones as well. We are playing a tournament. In fact, we are playing Qualifier number 3 for the $5,000 tournament that, if you guys watch my previous videos, you will already have seen me play 2 of. And today, what I'm gonna do is, I already hinted at it in the last edition, I believe, is I am going to not cheese for once. Specifically, I'm gonna pretend to be cheesy, but I'm gonna play very normal. So what happens quite often recently, and especially in that last video, is that players really do some ridiculous tier blind countering. Now, when you play blind counters in StarCraft 2, there is a pretty reasonable way to do it. Like, for example, let's say you play against a player of which you know if he plays double gas, he's always going to all in behind it. Then you see a double gas opening and you're like, okay, I think it's very likely he's going to go for one base all in. I'm just going to do this. It's a whole nother category to see nothing at all, nothing suspicious. In fact, often my opponents would see things the other way around. They would see a third command center, and then they would still try to blind counter a cheese, which I would obviously then still do, because I was always doing stupid cheesy challenges, right? So for this video, we're playing in a tournament, and I'm going to be doing pretty much fake cheeses every single game. Which means that depending on the matchup, I'm going to either open with double gas or I'm going to fake proxy, so I'm going to hide my buildings, but I'm actually going to play very normal. Now, when I say normal, just to clarify, I mean normal for me, right? So I'm still going to add some of my flavor in it, even when I play the more standard macro games, quote unquote. I will still add my flavor into it. This game is something you guys are going to like as well. Now, when I was playing this qualifier, I actually wasn't feeling too well, so I decided to do it without commentary, enhancing my focus, and that's why we're going to be doing a voiceover now. That's also what it usually means when there's no webcam, by the way, if you guys were curious. Now, the first opponent of the day is going to be Ryung, the 5th best Terran player from Korea. A TVT specialist, almost made a GSL finals back in the day. These days he's had some nice playoff runs as well. Obviously not the easiest opponent to play in my first match. Actually, my first match opponent didn't show up, so that's why he was my first opponent. So that is, yeah, either fortunate or unfortunate, you guys tell me. Now, this is going to be a very interesting one, because I don't really ever practice standard gameplay. However, recently, and with recently I mean about the past week or so, I've been trying to get into the habit of playing 5 regular games a day. And that is mostly just to prevent myself from being too washed up, I guess. Like, I know for my content, right? I'm always going to play a weird way. Sometimes some aspects of my game might lack a little bit, so I figured if I just play 5 games a day, it's really not a lot. Usually takes me, I would say, an hour and 15 minutes or so on average. Something like that. Just keeps me a little more in shape, right? And that way I'm going to be a little better. And those games have actually been going very well for me. I was even thinking about making another video of getting some replays, watching some replays from my games on the ladder, because I have beaten some absolute gold tier players already, so that's very cool. Now, this is where the game is pretty much going to begin. So I tried to fake proxy, my opponent didn't scout, so that didn't work. And then I'm going to follow it up with my most standard TVT build that I had back in the day. This was a very funky fight, because he had a lot of army in the middle. He could have decided to dive on one part of my army. Instead, he just ran away. I think we traded 1 unit efficiently for us, but we did take a lot of damage. Now we are going to get a couple SCVs on the back end here. Probably just going to wait for him to turn up with some units. And this was a pretty nice start. So just to remind you guys of the ideal formula for my build, what it used to be back in the day, is something very similar to what you're seeing here. I sometimes would play completely passively, but for the most part, here's the Cyclone, so now we're going to have to end up being careful. For the most part, I liked playing aggressive, but not hyper committed. So kind of like this, where you pressure, you give yourself the opportunity to get in their face, outplay them, and if you don't, it's not like you're necessarily too far behind, because your build wasn't super committed, right? Here, I actually think overall this was a good trade. I know I lost 3 units there, and you might be wondering, was it unnecessary to stay? I actually think it was okay. And that's only for the reason, this is a very important one and a bit of a deeper bit of knowledge in TVT, is that Raven energy is so important in TVT. Interference Matrix is just an absolute god tier ability. If you have an early game fight, a lot of the times it's going to be 2 tanks against 2 tanks or 3 against 3. And if you can disable your opponent's tanks, you are simply gonna win that fight. So he used 100 energy in auto turrets. Excuse me. Here he's going to use another couple, or I think that was another 100 energy, right? I think it was 2 auto turrets there. I used one myself to make sure I wouldn't get chased. Lost a couple units here and there, but once again, I actually didn't think it was so bad. Now here, I actually went for a very experimental follow-up. This is definitely where you can see that I'm not going to play 100% standard. I'm just playing a little more reasonable off-challenge, I guess. So I have a new build that is actually a 15-year-old build that I haven't seen in forever, and I just wanted to try it out. So I was thinking, what if instead of going for upgrades, also, you guys might want to remind me of this, I thought of an insanely cool build idea while I was playing this game. So I'm definitely going to try that as well later, another day, not in this video, but it's going to be very cool. So if I forget about that, you guys might want to remind me, hey, you told us you had a cool build idea, I'll probably remember what it is. But the build I want to do here is I want to go for 5 factory before upgrades because I thought it would allow me to get a lot of units out and I can actually put on a really good amount of pressure. Now this attack is also going to be very nice. Once again, he used 4 auto turrets before. Look at the army I have left. Imagine if he had 4 more auto turrets, right? We would have gotten absolutely owned, even if we had the extra, what was it, 2 Reapers and 1 Hellion or something I lost. So now we get a nice contain on him. I already built my command center on location, so I'm already mining and I have a lot of production. So now what you want to do is you want to keep air control for as long as you can. You have to imagine the opponent's Vikings are going to be a little faster, if he's going to go for Vikings, that is. So you need to make sure you retreat at the right time. And we're keeping an eye periodically on the Raven energy, because the moment those Ravens get 75 energy, as you can see, those Ravens have similar energy on all 3 of them. So at some point, he's going to get 3 interference matrices, and then we want to get the hell out before that happens, because then, you know, we're just going to be losing our tanks here, which would be a pretty big deal. Now, if you look at my supply, it looks quite significant. It is a high amount of supply. My eco is good as well. But this is kind of where I did this build once before. This is the second time I'm doing it, as you guys are watching it. The problem is definitely in the upgrades, because at some point here are the interference matrices. I was a little bit too late to respond, sadly, so that's a bit annoying for me. I guess I got mostly distracted by that juicy base on the left side that I wanted to kill the workers off of, which I did manage to do, to be fair. But in hindsight, I would have rather kept the 2 tanks alive. But yeah, like I was saying, this is kind of where the problem with this build begins. Because so far, everything looks to be going quite well for me, right? Like, my army is pretty big, I contained it for a while. Just to update you guys on the timings, I think on average, a TVT build order will have 2-2 started by now on the bio. So he already has 1-1, making his units way stronger than mine, and he's gonna have 2-2. Now, mech, you might think, doesn't care about upgrades because you have siege tanks. It's not entirely true, because a really good way to play against mech is to just do base trades and stuff like that, right? So this is a really big fight, by the way. I didn't actually expect him to come back here. Once again, doesn't have that much energy on the Ravens. I mean, that's because he used the interference matrixes on 2 tanks earlier. In the end, I wouldn't really say we won this fight, actually, because once again, I'm going to keep reminding you guys of the situation here. We are, I wouldn't really call it all in, but we just want to do some damage. Like, I'm taking a fortresses behind it, but you want to do some serious damage when you play 2 factory before upgrades, or 5 factory before upgrades, rather. And that was not really the fight I was looking for. I didn't really expect him to come in from the top side there. I could have sieged my tanks a little earlier, and then we probably would have won that fight a little more convincingly. For now, we still have more than enough units, and that was a really funny moment. I guess you guys probably didn't notice that. It's very hard to notice in TVT with all the scans and stuff, but he scanned my 3rd base. What that means is that we had so many units that he wasn't sure if we even had a 3rd base or if I was all-inning on 2 bases. That's all because of the 5 factory. Like, the unit count I have is so absurd. Keep in mind, I just lost my entire army besides the air units, and I'm still at 140 supply. Like, this build definitely has some potential. We're just gonna have to find out a little bit of a better follow-up so I don't struggle with the upgrades as much. Now I'm actually gonna, since we have a little bit of time here, since I'm just trying to contain him pretty much, waiting for my liberators to arrive, I'm gonna share you guys the idea that I had, and that is to make 1 armory before you add the extra factories, just to get armor upgrades, right? Now here the liberator arrives, so he's gonna have to move his tanks back and forth. You want to take this really slow, because with the upgrades, if you ever fight on siege, you're just gonna get absolutely cooked, right? Like, it's not a good idea. Also notice how my ravens are 1 HP, so I'm gonna have to be very, very careful here. Now I already started making some turrets at home at some point, exactly for this reason, right? Like he was gonna obviously go for a counterattack because we haven't seen any units and medevacs recently. So we're just gonna be sieging our units over here. Now he scanned my army, so he's probably gonna be trying to come back over here. Air control is looking very, very juicy. Liberators are doing very, very well. And now we're in a position where all we have to do is beat his army once, pretty much. Like we have a really good amount of eco that might change. You know, looking like it, I might probably eat my words here because he is attacking on that side. So our eco is probably going to fall down to what his eco was. But we're probably going to kill that army. That's not all I have, by the way. I also have a couple of unsieged tank as they're showing up now. More than a couple, actually. So now our eco is pretty similar, but now our army is more massive. So we're just going to have to make sure that we do not throw our army away, and then we're probably pretty golden. Now, to quickly get back to the idea that I was mentioning before, is so tanks are going to do a lot of damage without attack upgrades anyway, right? But armor really matters against bio. So I was thinking, what if you rush armor so fast that your army is a little smaller, but you have +2 armor when they still only have +1 attack? Legitimately, it's like one of those ideas that I haven't tried at all. It could be an absolutely terrible idea, but it sounds really freaking cool. So that's the build I want to try at some point. I'm glad I got it in before I would have forgotten it. Maybe you guys wouldn't have reminded me, but that's the build idea that I thought of. Now we're still in the same situation here. We're going to kill a bunch of SCVs. I did notice, however, that he does have another base on the bottom side. I think he probably doesn't have that many SCVs. We still have enough air army that we can take care of medevacs. Very important to keep your Viking count up for that reason, by the way. You need to be able to snipe medevacs that try to drop on top of your tanks more than anything else. Besides that, we have a really good contain. What I would expect him to do is, oh, he's actually going to go for it right away. Now, this is where the Raven energy is massive, by the way. Pay attention to that. That was about 8 auto turrets falling down. Obviously, they died fast, but they bought a lot of time so the tanks wouldn't be that vulnerable to the bio. I'm going to keep a couple tanks alive. His army is now tiny, and you might think, well, you don't have units left. I have 157 supply, guys, because I wasn't reinforcing because his army was in between. But now my absolutely gargantuan army is going to show up. Judging from the minimap, that is about 6 siege tanks, maybe like telehelis or so. He's going to try to go forward, but I can also land these Vikings, and now my Liberator have control of the ramp. And that is game number 1, done and dusted with an absolutely epic 5-factory rush. For game 2, I decided to stick with a very similar plan because it worked so well in game number 1. This time, I decided to build the barracks behind my main base. I mean, in the last game, he didn't even scout anyway, but it's also not really that big of a deal, as we've noticed and as I've talked about. Most players will just counter my cheesiness without even seeing anything. So at some point you have to wonder if just building my barracks in a normal location would have the same effect as a fake proxy. Because the point of a fake proxy is that they respond to it and think you're cheesing. But if they do that anyway, even when my buildings are in the normal place, you know, I guess food for thought. But anyway, this time I decided to build it behind my main base. Usually what I look at for fake proxies is just where the space is per map. Because on some maps, I think it was the last one, if I remember correctly, there's not really a lot of space behind the mineral line, so then if you build, like, let's say a factory there, or barracks even, the units might end up getting out a little awkwardly, and that's annoying. So this map had a little bit more space, so I figured I might as well build it there anyway. So now we're getting scouted, and he is indeed not going to see the barracks. Now this is a very funny one, because look at where that SCV is going, guys. He is going to check out the fake proxy. Dude, hey, that was actually sick. You guys realize that I just, with that camera movement, I kind of predicted my commentary a little bit. Like, I already kind of showed it in the game itself before I added the commentary now. That was pretty cool. But yeah, he decided to check the fake proxy location because I have actually fake proxied against him before. I've played a couple times against him in challenges, maybe 2 or 3 times. So he checked there, but not behind the main base. There is a chance that because he didn't see a proxy there, he would have added a bunker and then he would have had to cancel it. So I would call it a, yeah, very minor success. If anything, I added a couple mind games, right? So it's all good. So basically what my plan for this video was not just to fake cheese and play like the most honorable macro game ever. I really wanted to just play, I guess, a little more sensible, a little more logical. So instead of hardcore not cheesing or hardcore cheesing or following whatever challenge, I just wanted to adapt to the situation, add some mind games, and really just not not cheese hardcore, right? That was basically the idea. So I can still play aggressive, I can play defensive, I just want to adapt to what I see pretty much. So this game, I wasn't necessarily going to do the same opening every single game, but I felt like the last game was very comfortable from the start. Even though my opponent had a pretty good build against mine, going for 6 Hellions, I felt pretty relaxed playing against that. Obviously we had a good start, so I decided to just go for the same thing again. Now, there's a bunch of different follow-ups you can do. You can also go for a Medevac or a Liberator or just go for Ravens. And we're just going to have to see how it goes. I actually wanted to adapt a little more in the openings when I can. Because a lot of times I notice that I kind of decide the strategy beforehand. And now I'm not really talking about the challenges, right? Because obviously if I do challenges, then the strategy is decided beforehand. But even when I'm not, I kind of decide the strategy in advance. And even when stuff happens, I'll just be like, oh, I got behind, I'll still do the same thing. Or I got ahead, I'll still do the same thing. But now I really wanted to focus a bit more on, okay, if the build goes well, maybe I can pile on the aggression. Or if the build doesn't go well, maybe I can take a step back. Now this is going to be the standard attack here. 5 Reapers and 4 Hellions. He already has a Cyclone, which is annoying, but we got a really nice grenade off there at the start. We're going to be able to kill all of the small units. Now here, it's very tempting to dive the Cyclone because it actually does die pretty fast, but those SCVs were extremely juicy, so I went for those instead. I think I don't know how many I killed, maybe like 6 or something. Definitely feels pretty good. I am not 100% sure what his opening was. Since he did not have a bunker, it is tempting to say that he went for a double gas, because with Reaper Expand you would usually go for a bunker, but he also could have already salvaged it. Now this is the adaptation that I was talking about, right? I felt like this was a really good start. You guys might think I lost a lot of units, but killing that many SCVs in TVT is very brutal. TVT builds are so uneconomic because you need a lot of units early on, that killing 6 SCVs feels fantastic, okay? It's not like killing 6 drones with your 6 Hellions against Zerg. It's kind of like, you know, whatever. You're probably not going to notice it too much, but if you lose 6 SCVs in a TVT in particular, it's going to hurt a lot. So what I decided to do was I was going to go for the second starport this game, as you can see. This is not necessarily an all-in playstyle. It's more like you get air control and you can push a little earlier, right? So you're gonna get Ravens plus Vikings. If your opponent's not playing double starport, he can never catch up. And here my reasoning was that since I did economic damage, even if he would go for a double starport, I would probably be able to outproducing when it comes to the Vikings, or at least the tanks, or whatever he decides to spend his money on, right? Now, I'm deciding to be very aggressive here. I did really like being aggressive in the last game. Not necessarily the early push I'm talking about, but you notice I did a bit more of the mid-game move-outs, right? Like I moved out with my 1 tank, just trying to poke a little bit here and there, and I decided to follow up with that same playstyle. So I decided to siege my tank in a very sneaky spot. So if he poked forward with the Cyclones again, maybe I could get a big hit off. Maybe I would be able to scare him back. I saw he had a tank there as well. Very close to killing that Cyclone, by the way. Barely not going to get it. And now this tank, I'm going to unsiege it. Because keep in mind, he's going to have the interference matrix pretty soon, right? And then he can kill that tank for free. Do not want that to happen. Actually, I left it behind for a little bit too long. That was a little bit of a mistake by me, but he didn't capitalize on it because he assumed I would go back. Now, he seems to be moving out here. I think the best idea for me is pretty much what I'm doing here is I'm just going to stand in the middle. Now, one thing I have to be very careful of is that he has more tanks at the front than me until my reinforcements arrive. So I'm going to have to be very careful. Now, keep in mind, my army is massive because I went for the second starport. Now, he went down the ramp. I thought he was going to go back, but he actually goes down the ramp. I have one more Raven. It looks like some spamming auditors like crazy. I have a fantastic concave as well. I had one more interference matrix for that tank. There's only one tank left I can shoot now. It's not going to get... Actually, it does get another shot off, surprisingly. That is pretty painful. Now, this is when it becomes super hard for Terran to defend, because what you can do is you can just land the Vikings. Vikings do bonus damage against mechanical. So Vikings, Cyclones, tanks, SCVs, everything dies to Vikings super fast. And just like that, we get a super comfortable 2-0 dub against Ryung, one of the best Terrans in Korea. The second series and qualifying match was going to be against Nicorak. You guys might remember him because one time I chased him pretty viciously, and that is gonna, you know, lead into very well into today's quote-unquote challenge of playing normal. It's a challenge for me, guys, trust, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go with the exact same thing as the last game. Against Nicorak, I think I will need some more adaptation because I talked about this in the Cheesy video as well, that he has been quite difficult for me to beat in TVT. As far as I understand their styles, I would say he's completely opposite of Ryung. Now, I don't know if you could really tell what Ryung's style was from the last video, because honestly, we took him down pretty viciously, okay? Like, he didn't really get to play the game that much, I guess. But Ryung is a real macro master, really good in the late game, really good at passive play. And Nicorect, even though he plays long games as well, he's very good and vicious as the aggressor, right? He really likes to attack and stuff. So pretty much a completely different player, both very good Terrans. He also had a really good run before meeting me in the qualifying match, by the way. He beat Young Yakov, who is currently, I don't know, the fourth best Zerg in Europe or something like that. 6.5k MMR the other day, which is absolutely massive. And after that, he beat Nightmare, one of the best Protoss players in Korea. So he was in good shape, at least today, and we had our work cut out for us. Now, I could tell that I felt a little more nervous in this match, and it's a thing I've had against Terrans that tend to be very YOLO. I feel like it's very nerve-wracking to play against them in TVT, because in TVT, you can just lose the game just like instantly. Like, if he gets on top of your Reaper and he gets a good grenade, you lose the Reaper, then you lose the SCV building the CC, and you have to send another one, but you can't ride it. Like, it's an actual disaster. If you lose the first Reaper, it's very, very bad. So I was really babysitting my units pretty hardcore here. As you can tell, I kept my Reaper right next to the SCV, not even far in front of it, just like right there, so I could make sure that if I needed it, I could pull my SCV to help, and I wouldn't lose my Reaper right away. I guess it's a good sign of respect that I have for Nicorect's Reaper skills, right? Because if those Reaper skills were not on point, I wouldn't need to do that, but against Nicorect, I knew that I would, so that's where my positioning was. I guess I can talk a little bit more about the positioning of my units in this build. It's quite interesting to do. So first of all, you keep the Reaper and the Hellion at the front. Ideally, you keep them somewhat close to the ramp so you can send them into the main base if two Reapers jump into your main base from the opponent's side, right? Then what you want to do is the first two Reapers you finish, you do want to send them to that, what do you call it, the Reaper jump up spot right there. So if he does go with the Reapers later on, you're already there, and then you make sure that your units are still close enough that you can join up whenever you get attacked, like this. So you see my units on the high ground were close enough that I could go for this. Now my build here, I don't really know who was favorable here, to be honest. Like, he went for a later reactor and an earlier attack. That means he's gonna have a faster Cyclone, but I will have more units than him right away. So I started my Raven here. I started Interference Matrix as well. My Hellion was a little bit late here for some reason, not quite sure why. And this is when I figured I might be in trouble, because he hit his units, I missed him, and I went for the counter attack. He is gonna lose a lot of SCVs here, but he might already have a Cyclone up there. It's a Cyclone and 6 Marines already, which is a pretty crazy amount of units. I do not have a wall because I was hiding my buildings from a scout that I'm not even sure arrived. It did arrive, and sadly for us, that was a very anticlimactic game number 1. I have to GG out there, and you have to give credit where credit's due. He realized exactly what I was doing, and he prepared the best counter, but I was still very positive. Let's win game number 2. For game number 2, I was gonna take a different approach. Like I mentioned, against an opponent like Nicorect, I would have to adapt a little more. A problem I've had in TVT is that early game can feel a little bit random. So, not necessarily in the sense where you can't control it, right? But I feel like you have to be super, super on point, and just, you can't make a single mistake or you're gonna die kind of thing. And I felt like Nicorect was going to be a little better at those double gas Reaper Hellion skirmish than I. So I was going to switch it up, and I was actually going to take a page out of the book of Ryung. So Ryung played against me. I believe it was, I don't know if it was 8. I think it was 6 Hellions and a Raven. Presumably from a Reaper expand. I'm not quite sure if that was true. But I was actually going to go for that build order myself. And this actually ties into very well into my fake cheesing thing. Because a build that I've very commonly done, and Nicorect is definitely going to know about, is to go for the 8 Hellion Liberator attack, and you kind of all in with it. So what you do is you go Reaper expand, you make 8 Hellions and a Liberator, and you seize the lib in the main, you run 8 Hellions just into whatever they have in the natural, you kill as many SCVs as possible. That's basically the idea. So I figured, what if I just start with that opening? He's gonna think that that's definitely what I'm doing. But then I just make a couple rounds of Hellions, however many I want, and seem good for the situation, and go straight into Ravens. That way I have a really good macro game follow-up. My opponent's gonna get mind-gamed, and I'll have a decent amount of units that I can withstand his most likely early game pressure with. Now, the build I was most scared of here was for a super fast 2 Reaper jump up into the main. And I think that is why this building positioning is legit really good. I'm actually proud of this building positioning because I thought of it in the moment. I didn't have this planned. I was just kind of thinking, where on earth am I going to put down my barracks? And then this is what I came up with, and it's really good. So what happens when you play like this is that 2 Reapers jump in about 5 seconds, and then they kill your starport SCV and maybe more. So if you build them as far away from the ramp and the Reaper jump up as possible, the chance that you lose SCVs is way less likely, and then it's actually good. Now at this point, unless this map is massive, which it is not, it doesn't seem like he's gonna attack with a couple Reapers, so that is quite nice for me. Then I'm just gonna get away with playing Reaper Expand into Hellions, at least I think so, and that is a fantastic start. Now, Nicorrect, as far as I know, I've only seen him do 2 openings. He either plays Double Gas or he plays Proxy Reaper, actually. And really it is... I think I've seen him do Proxy Reaper like twice and Double Gas like 200 times. So that's about the ratio there is. I don't think he plays Reaper Expand or anything else, really. I think he just plays those. Now, this is where my build order, I think, is quite nice against what he did. As you can tell, he already gave up on killing my units pretty soon. Instead, went for the SCVs. Now, we are going to lose a second SCV there, but once again, Reaper Expand against Double Gas, I think the advantage you have from that economically is about 3 SCVs. So theoretically, we should be up by 1 SCV, and we didn't lose our units. Did we lose 1 Reaper, maybe? I think we probably did, not 100% sure. But yeah, obviously we traded very efficiently there, so that's fantastic. Went for the Raven already, so there's no pressure on doing damage with the Liberator, and this was a really good idea. Shout out to Ryung for playing that build against me, because I don't think I would have remembered this build otherwise. Also, quick thing, if you're wondering why on earth my depot is below the ramp, I don't know why. I just felt like doing it. There's no particular reason for it. Now here you can see we're going to be able to kill a couple of SCVs. That auto turret was purely... not sure if I liked that auto turret necessarily because of what I explained in the game against Ryung, but I just wanted to have a bit more control of the natural, make sure the SCVs have to run away and kill as many as possible. So far, this is a fantastic start. Remember what I said about adapting? That's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go for the second starport again. I really wasn't planning on doing this at all. If you play Double Gas, or if I play Double Gas, it's usually in the back of my mind somewhere, like, okay, maybe this is a double starport kind of game, we'll see. From a Reaper Expand, not really. I felt a bit nervous in this moment, I remember, because I simply didn't know how it was going to work out. But I did a lot of damage. I felt like the early game was nice for me. Both the skirmish on my side was nice, and the skirmish on his side was nice. So I decided to pop down the second starport. Now, I do think I made a mini mistake here that I did not make in the game against Ryung with the double starport, and that is that I built the starport on the reactor. So what I did in the first game that I did this build, the game against Ryung, is that I kept making Marines from that reactor until the starport was finished, right? That gives you, I believe, 4 or 6 Marines. I mean, you still make half of those if you're not on the reactor, right? So I guess you get 3 or 4 extra Marines or whatever. This was actually very nice, by the way. Sometimes Hellions can feel a little useless later in the game, but that was a lot of Marines killed. But since you kind of want to brute force with this build, a couple extra Marines actually would have been nice. So definitely, I mean, it's a bit of hindsight. You're kind of trying things and experimenting and doing different builds and whatever, right? But in hindsight, I think I would have preferred to have those couple extra Marines. As you can see, I really don't have a lot of Marines. I think he has more than me even after that early scuffle there. So that is a bit unfortunate. Now we're going to go for it straight away. He seemed to be committing with his Raven, so I'm also dropping every single auto turret. This fight... It was slightly questionable from both of us, to be honest. I kind of dove in a little bit recklessly, perhaps. Like, I don't think I waited for my second siege tank even, which is painful. But I did use all of my Raven energy, and if you remember, this is not entirely all in, but it's pretty committed, right? So you really want to do some serious damage, and now I lost all that auto turret energy, and I don't have Marines to buffer for my tank, so definitely a bit questionable. However, hitting those 2 Ravens that he had on the back end of that, I think made it all a lot better. Now, this is a funny micro battle in the top right, Viking and Cyclone. What you want to do is try to get out of vision, right? So the Cyclone lock-on breaks. I think so far it actually worked. So we're going to siege a little closer, and here I just decided to pull the trigger and go for it. Once again, very risky move. He has a good amount of units, and I kind of regret going for this. Cyclone came from the back. It is going to die pretty fast. I believe that this was not the best decision by me. We basically traded armies. My build was a bit more committed. I think all in all, if I would have to guess, I would say this game is actually pretty even. Kind of depending on how fast his third base was, but judging by what I know from Nicorrect, his third base wasn't going to be that fast because he likes to play aggressive. My build doesn't have that good of a follow-up, so it's kind of 50-50 if you calculate everything. And now I'm put in an awkward spot. Because from this position, you don't really want to go bio because you're going to get your upgrades too late, both Stim and Combat Shield and 1-1. And bio versus bio down on upgrades is an actual nightmare, okay? It's horrible. You do not want to do that. It sucks. So you're kind of forced to play mech here. Now here we're going to trade very evenly on those Vikings. And we're going to be able to get a depot with those 2 tanks. Actually found a little micro tip that I can give you, by the way. Sounds very niche, but I mean it is, but it's still very useful. If you're trading Viking against Viking, and your shot is slightly later than the others, what you want to do is you don't want to run away. You want to fly to max range, because then the impact of the shot is later and your Viking still kills his. If my Viking was too close to his there, my Viking would have died without killing his, I believe, even though it was very close. But since I flew away just a little bit, I actually got the opportunity. Now, once again, very awkward position. His build is way better suited for the macro game. That was an accidental Banshee, by the way, but I kind of dig it, actually. His build is way better suited for the macro game, but we got a bit ahead economically, I think. Now, I made another micro mistake here, and that is the second reactor on that factory, okay? Well, okay, let's be honest here. I think it is more than a micro mistake, because the only thing that I have going for myself here is that I have air control. Besides that, my army is weak. How do you overcome a weak army? It's by having a lot of siege tanks, right? Because siege tanks kind of, you know, if you have 10 tanks, even though the other guys have 50 marines, the tanks have a good chance to win. That was supposed to be a second tech lab. Instead, I'm now making mass Hellions. I just kind of rolled with it. One thing I could have done here in hindsight, I just noticed I should have switched the starport with the tech lab with the factory, because I don't think I really needed anything from that tech lab anymore. I wasn't going to get BCs anytime soon. Banshees are great, but Banshees, actually kind of a funny thing. It might happen here already, yeah. Notice how now it takes 3 shots to kill an SCV. It's because +1 armor kicked in, right? So when +1 armor kicks in, the Banshees kind of lose their value. So that's what I should have done, instead of just making mass Hellions, but it is what it is. And now the game we have to play is a game of pure adaptation. I realized that if I moved out on the map, we were going to get absolutely dusted. There's no other way around it. We have not enough siege tanks to fight a big marine count. So what we're going to do is we're going to sit back, we're going to make an Omega army, we're going to build planetaries, and we're going to win the game that way, hopefully, right? Still have 2 Ravens up. My opponent does not have any Ravens, so at least we're not going to have to worry about his siege tanks as much. That was very unfortunate there, losing a Liberator. That's a bit painful. And now there's also only 2 siege tanks here, so he might be tempted to go for it. But keep in mind, I do still have those Ravens. The Ravens are very, very useful here because they just managed to buy time. I know I lost the energy on those, but they bought me enough time for the tanks to get in position. Now the Liberators are here as well. I still have the Vikings, and you should be able to get a bit more damage done here. Probably going to kill that gas on the right side, for example, but at least we stabilize, which is nice, and we already have the 4th base up. Now, as long as we don't lose too many siege tanks, the trades are okay. I think I went up to 3 tech labs already in the meantime, so that is going to be quite nice for us. Hopefully I have Blue Flame on these Hellions as well. I'm not quite sure if I do. I do have Blue Flame, so we're going to be able to kill these SCVs quite nicely. There we go. That's about 7 SCVs falling. One of the biggest strengths that mech has in StarCraft 2, by the way, it sounds really silly, I know, because mech, if you think about it, it's a slow composition, right? But one of the biggest advantages it has is that you get, I don't want to say free, but maybe uThermal free. You guys know what it means when I say free. It means I lose 3 Hellions, right? That's free. Okay? It's cheap. It's good damage, I guess is what it means. And here with mech, since the limit you have is on gas, you have a lot of extra minerals to spend, and you can basically just make Hellions and send them across forever. So you want to make use of that, just non-stop sending Hellions to the other side. Here, I got enough Liberators, so I was able to scare them away, and I decided to go for a Fusion Core. Now, we are kind of in a similar predicament as we were in that first game against Ryung, where we don't have upgrades. So at some point, we're going to be 0-0 against 2-2, and that's going to be painful. Here, I'm going to start my armories. Once again, still going to be 0-0 against 2-2. If he stayed on top of his upgrades, which I'm quite sure he would have. But we do have an Omega army, and it's kind of funny we got into this situation to begin with, even though it was for a completely different reason, right? Here we opened with a double starport. The other game we just went for an upgradeless build. Now I have a bunch of tanks over here. He scans how many units I have. He decides it's not enough and he goes for it. Now I thought at the time that this was quite psychotic, because that is not 3 Liberators or 2, that was 9 Liberators. Look at these Liberators, everything is just exploding. His entire army disappeared. I think he's gonna have 2 red tanks alive and I don't know, like 5, what is that, 8 bio units, I believe. Really not that many. At this point, I decided to get my Liberator range as well. Not gonna go for battle cruisers. I would definitely later, but it wasn't the time for battle cruisers yet, and now we could push across. Now, once again, we are still in the predicament of not having upgrades against bio units, so we want to make sure to siege our Liberators, right? We don't just want to go forward with our tanks very blindly. Now, here, those Liberators are doing so well against the Marines. The Marauders are getting obliterated. And after that absolutely beautiful fight with the mass Liberators, we clinch game number 2. Now, when I was playing this game, I really wanted to see that fight again and see the unit lost, because it was just absolutely ridiculous. Look at this fight here, guys. You can see the units lost in the top left. There is a 400 difference. So the initial part of the fight is quite okay for him because he kills all of the tanks, but then on the back end, the Liberators pop off and the difference ends up being 2,500. Absolutely disgusting fight, and we go into game number 3, the qualifying map. The final game of the day, we were gonna take yet another different approach. This time, I'm making the barracks in the wall for once. The reason why is because I made a prediction here. I figured that he would still think that I was going to cheese him, because I have been just ruthlessly cheesing everyone, right? So, once again, guys, this is the qualifying game for a $5,000 tournament. Obviously, in those kind of games, people tend to pull out their best strategies, right? So what I thought is that he was going to go for a Proxy Reaper, because Proxy Reaper pretty much counters every single proxy cheese besides Proxy Reaper, and in that case it's even, right? But anything else the Proxy Reaper would win. Doesn't matter if it's Marines or Marauders or whatever, the Proxy Reaper would win. So what I did is I decided to go for 2 Rax Reaper, predicting his Proxy Reaper, and if he doesn't Proxy Reaper, then we still have some aggressive potential ourselves. This doesn't have to be a super hardcore all-in. In TVT, builds are always very... Hey, that was very interesting, by the way. Before I forget, I want to touch on that. You guys saw his SCV just came from my natural. So either he's proxying there or he checked for my fake proxy in advance before walking up my ramp. That would be very funny if we conditioned him to do that. That would be very funny. I'm just gonna check anyway. There's no proxy there, so it seems like we actually did condition him to do that, which is hilarious, to be honest. Now we're gonna check over here for a Proxy Reaper. If we find it, the answer is very simple. We stay up the ramp. If we don't, we're gonna stay a little more aggressive. So I was saying, builds in TVT, I've mentioned it a couple times, always very uneconomic in TVT. So even though I'm opening 2 barracks in 1 factory, you can still totally fine pay a macro game from that, as long as you get a little bit of damage. Now, I was trying to pay attention to how many units he would have with his standard build. He would probably be about to get 2 Reapers and 1 Hellion. I figured it would be a good idea to go with 3 or maybe 4 Reapers and try to see if we can actually catch anything. For now, I'm standing in the bush. It's a very annoying place to stand. It's a line of sight blocker, so if he would approach, he would not be able to win that fight. He would just take damage. There is the command center. This command center shows me that we are going up against a double gas. Otherwise, it would have been finished already, I believe. Or actually, either finished or right about to finish. It's definitely a double gas command center anyway. So what I decided to do is fall back, wait for a couple more reinforcements. Command center is already down on my side. Sadly for us, it wasn't that Proxy Reaper that we predicted, but doesn't mean that we're not going to have any chance to win this game, of course. Like I mentioned, we're just going to have to try and do some damage. If that works, then we are going to be completely fine. In fact, I've even won games with this kind of attack, so it's, you know, nothing bad has happened just yet for us. Now, the command center is almost finished. I was really hoping we'd be able to get the SCV, but we barely don't. Now, this is a weird fight, because I'm kind of surrounding him with grenades, and at the same time, he went into one group of my unit set. I think it was very good micro by him, but now he is stuck. There's no Reaper jump-up spot up there. His units are already quite low HP. He threw a grenade at my units, figuring that I would walk past. I'm going to be able to kill all of these and another SCV. And I would say that I don't know if we're ahead, actually, because I did lose a couple units there on the top side. If you remember, my base is a lot later. His mule is going to be faster from the natural. I would say that we are probably in an economically similar position, but I have more units than him, but he has the one cyclone that we just saw on his ramp. In case you didn't see it, that's why I ran away, because I saw the cyclone there. Now here, I already decided to go for some add-ons, because we're going to have to, you know, stop making Reapers at some point. To the disappointment of many, I'm sure, but this is not that video, guy. I have enough of those guys, don't you worry. Now, what I decided to do as a follow-up here, actually really love this idea, by the way, is to go for a medevac before anything else. If you wonder, how can you use the medevac here? This is literally the easiest army composition to use a medevac with. It's really, really cool. So what you can do is you put the Hellions in the medevac and you just fly over the Reaper jump-up spot. And then the Reapers jump up and the Hellions get dropped. You can just enter the base with everything at once. Now, sadly for us, he was actually going to harass with that Raven. And that's how we saw my army, so that's a bit annoying. He's going to drop an auto turret here already. My plan was to just go for the workers here. Okay, well, to be honest, I didn't have a plan. It was just all split-second decision-making. So here, I went for the SCVs. Going to do a little bit of micro on those locked-on Reapers as well. Could have gone for that Cyclone, actually, but I decided to just get a couple more SCVs on the back end. Going to get another one, building this barracks, I think. Yeah, we are going to get that. And that was really, I want to say, a solid 8 workers dying or so, and that means that we are now firmly in the lead economically, but army-wise, we're definitely going to be down, right? Because what did I kill there? Maybe 1 or 2 Marines. I didn't even see anything dying. Maybe 1 or 2 Marines, I'm not sure. We got 1 auto turret, I guess, which is nice, but that is really going to be it. Now, this was a really cool adaptation that I did. That is very uncommon. My opponent seemed, and this is not a 100% certainty, but judging by the timings from the barracks in his base, it seemed like he played 3 racks before 3rd command center. Now, that is something that you can totally defend playing 1-1-1 3cc, right? You don't necessarily need the extra barracks. However, I already traded a lot of units, right? Like, I lost a lot of units in his main base. I lost the medevac as well, I believe, right? Yeah, so I lost, what is it, 5 Reapers? No, way more Reapers, actually. Because how many did I make? Like 8 or something? 8, 9 Reapers? I lost a lot of units anyway, moral of the story. So if I would go for a 3cc, then I probably wouldn't be able to defend. So what I decided to do is to go for 3 racks myself with the superior economy that I had. Now, technically, he could have had a 3rd command center in the natural. I don't think he did, but it could have been there, so that is always a little bit scary, but that's the risk we're going to take. Now, the reason I'm flying this barracks is, you might be surprised why the hell the barracks is flying, is because I figured I was behind on the stim upgrade. So I went for a 2nd tech lab on the barracks. All of these I really think are very cool adaptations that I'm doing here. It's very uncommon, but I think considering the situation, it fits perfectly. So I wanted to make sure that I got combat shield at a decent time. I already had the more eco. Here I can see that he indeed does not have a 3rd base yet. Even if you don't fully see the 3rd base, you're always going to see either units positioned next to it or SCVs moving towards it, etc. And that clearly was not the case here. So at this point, I would guess that his army is stronger. He's probably going to get combat shields a little faster. Worst case scenario, he's going to have +1 faster. That really is a massive deal. However, I killed one of his Ravens, and the other Raven already used an auto turret in my main base as well. So my Raven energy is going to be super, super powerful here. If he goes for drops or sieges me with tanks, I can totally interference matrix the tanks or the medevacs or even anti-armor missile the Marines in other situations. So that is going to be quite nice for me. Now, it's very scary to go up against someone that has medevacs before you because you have to, exactly, look at this. I had a turret and a cyclone ready and some units. You have to split your units very well so you don't get caught off guard with a couple of drops in your base. Like, it really goes very, very painful, very fast. Now, this was a good movement by me, and I read that he wanted to attack at the front as well. The only reason he went with the medevacs there is to draw my army so he could go in the front. So now we know he was really, really aggressive. Now, combat shield finished for me, as well as my first 2 medevacs. So I decided I would be able to go out on the map. These situations are really extremely scary, to be honest. You need good spell casting, whatever. I'm glad I found this army, because not knowing where it was would have been more painful. Now, the reason I'm going forward here, guys, once again, it might be surprising, is all because of those Ravens. My tanks are sieging, and his tanks are all disabled. I got 2 more auto turrets off there, which was very, very nice as well. And as you can see, the tanks are really making the difference here. Now I'm splitting my Marines to make sure I don't take full splash damage from his tanks. It looks like we have wiped him off the map. And there it is, your boy, uThermalinho, or however you want to call me, has qualified for the $5,000 plus Wardy Championship Series. And it's really funny that it happened in this video of all of them where I pretend to cheese and kind of play normal. I guess I still know how to do it. It's kind of hard to say exactly how everyone reacted to my fake cheeses, but it's definitely very nice to throw one of these in there. For the main event, I'll probably be back to doing some absolute meme cheeses. Maybe not particular challenges, but just kind of do whatever cheesy stuff I want to do. But that's going to be it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this run. If you did, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all for the next one. Adios.